Tennessee This Week from WATE's 6 on Your Side starts now.
She's hoping to go from the Capitol in Washington to the Capitol in Nashville as Governor Diane Black talks about the issues. And a shakeup on the Supreme Court. Justice Kennedy stepping down. A chance for the president to add to his legacy. Plus new leadership for the TBI and the Knoxville Police Department. Right now on Tennessee This Week. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Kristen Farley. We are digging into the governor's race today. Republican candidates Bill Lee, Beth Harwell, Randy Boyd, and Diane Black faced off recently for the second of our debate series. And then earlier in the week, I had a chance to sit down with one of them, Diane Black, as the campaign trail brought her through Knoxville. All right, Congressman Black, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. Let's start off with a recent ranking. You earned an A from the NRA. You're also their pick for the GOP primary. Let's talk a little bit about bills in the legislature dealing with guns, because we kind of see tweaks all the time, guns in parks, guns in trunks. Let's talk a little bit about your view of the mix of freedoms here and limits. How do you combine that here in the state of Tennessee?
First of all, we have that in our Constitution. It is our right. It's provided in the Second Amendment. And I'm a big believer that guns are not the problem. It's the people that use the guns in the wrong way. And we shouldn't blame those law-abiding, hundreds of thousands of gun owners, law-abiding gun owners, well, for the craziness of a few people. And we've got to be very careful that we get to the root cause of why these incidents are happening. And as a nurse and someone who's been a nurse for more than 45 years, still has my license, I go back to root cause. And if we look at the root cause, especially the school shootings, the just devastation that has occurred, it is happening because people are mentally ill, and we've got to do more to identify and treat mental illness.
What does the state do about that? Because we're hearing from a lot of local leaders as well saying they want to see more focus on mental health and possibly more counselors in schools. What can the state of Tennessee do?
Absolutely. We need to, first of all, acknowledge that the people around them, the young people, especially in the schools, see something happening. And we want to make sure that we say, when you see something, say something, just like you do at the airport if you saw a danger. And many times, the young people that have a friend that starts to get into depression and maybe into things like dangerous video games and so on, they know something is changing and they need to say something. Teachers need to say something, counselors, and that we then thwart that from happening while we make sure that they're being treated and they never get their hands on a weapon.
All right, so if we think the focus should be root cause and possible mental health issues, what do you feel about arming teachers? That has been a popular issue and topic over the last year or so.
Yes, I believe that we should arm teachers where appropriate, where they are well trained. And I think a program such as in the sheriff's office, where the sheriff's office can verify that those individuals are trained to use a weapon in a dangerous situation, I am for that.
What do you say to the people out there who are petrified by that possibility, who say the last thing we need are more guns in our schools? What do you say to appease them?
We need people who know how to use guns. We don't need to use guns in school that would be inappropriate, obviously. We want people, though, that can protect our children. And you know what? If we're waiting for a sheriff to come when there's something like that happening, if someone is appropriately trained, and they must be certified and appropriately trained, they could thwart a lot of those injuries that would occur.
Let's shift gears and talk a little bit about immigration. And obviously, this has been a hot button issue for some time now, particularly over the last few weeks. There doesn't seem to be an easy fix. Is there something that you think we should do at the state level, or can we do anything at the state level?
I think we do have to do something at the state level, and it is up to the governor. It's the governor's #1 role to keep the citizens safe and secure. And so we do need to make sure that we are doing everything we can within our responsibility here at the state level. So, for instance, the Refugee Resettlement Program has, under the last 2 administrations, been farmed out to the nonprofits in the community. I want to take that back in. I want to make sure I know who is coming here, why they're coming, what they're bringing, and how long they stay. And I believe that is the role of the governor's office and the administration to ensure that safety. I also want to make sure that we are with our schools and those who are here illegally, that they don't take advantage of our taxpayer dollars and going to school, free tuition.
What about local leaders and mayors who say in essence, that they are creating sanctuary cities. What is your thought on that?
Again, we want to be secure, and we want to know why people are here and why they're coming and what they're going to do. I know that the legislature has taken action on this, that they have passed a bill to say there will be no sanctuary cities, but they're also looking at making sure they're not setting up policies to lead them in that direction. And I will be a governor that will say, number one is to keep the people safe, and that is my role and responsibility.
What is your reaction to the Supreme Court's upholding of the president's travel ban this past week?
I think it was a good decision to be made, and if we look back in history, and I know sometimes things get very political and you don't actually look at the history, but in previous administrations where there were countries that we know are state-sponsored terrorists, that they did say these folks from those areas cannot come until we make sure that we have safety measures in place. And that's exactly what our president did, is he chose those countries that were seen as state-sponsored terrorists, and to make sure that we were safe. And that is, again, the number one role of the federal government. It's my number one role as the governor of the state.
What do you say to people who look at the immigration issue and say, you know, our country was founded on bringing everyone in and being a melting pot and letting people come? Are we abandoning that philosophy?
Not at all, not at all. We, as was done back at that point in time, people had to come into the country legally. They were vetted. They came through Ellis Island, and they came here for the right reason. We haven't changed that philosophy. We welcome people that come here for the right reason, and we still do that today. We cannot allow people to come into our country not knowing what it is they're going to do when they get here, and keeping our borders safe and secure is a number one role.
Let's talk about the separating of families, and this has been something that we've all been watching, and everyone seems to have an opinion on it. If someone comes here and the children are separated from the parents because they were here illegally, what is the proper way in your mind to handle that?
Well, let me first of all say I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I cannot imagine being separated from my children or grandchildren. But neither can I imagine making that decision to put my children or grandchildren into an unsafe situation. So when people come here and they know, because there is a legal way of coming with asylum, and they should be coming here the legal way. And so I do agree with what the president is doing, where he is retaining the families together and deporting them together. But always remembering that when these folks come here and they try to come here around what is already set up as illegal, that they are breaking the law. And we have got to hold people accountable when they break the law in our country.
All right, let's go to basically your core here. What will be your first package of legislation if you get this position?
Well, there are three main topics that I think are very important to our state, and the number one for me is the opioids. As a nurse and also a family that has seen what happens in the destruction of the families by overdoses and losing people from that particular disease, that we have got to address opioids because it has become a crisis in our state. And there really are three buckets. We need to prevent it, number one, by education. And that's both for young and also for people that are adults that don't really always get good information about how they should be using that pain medication. We need to make sure that law enforcement has all of the help they can to close down the pill mills and stop the traffickers. And then finally, I think we're a compassionate people. We want to help people get their lives back together and have the right treatment program. Not one size fits all. We'll have to look at a myriad of ways that we can get people back, give their life back to them.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about health care here for a moment. When it comes to the state of Tennessee, are you in support of any form of Medicaid expansion or Insure Tennessee, or how do we tackle health care? Because that is an issue that is definitely not going away.
You know, we were doing a pretty good job in our state before Obamacare came along. And because of the rules and regulations under that program, there were some programs that were really working well for our uninsured and also for our businesses, the small businesses, to be able to come together and get a reduction in their costs because they did band together. I'd like to take a look at those programs again, but I'm not for Medicaid expansion. I know what happened when we tried to expand here in the state of Tennessee. It's actually what got me into public policy to begin with was TennCare. I went to Congress because of Obamacare. So I have seen it. I don't want to replay that story. What I do want is I want a grant, a block grant from the federal government. And as a nurse and being in healthcare for more than 45 years, let me set up a program where I believe that we can do a better job with providing simple, decent care for everyone.
How quickly could you really implement something like that? There are people who healthcare coverage is of dire need, but it's not a simple solution, and it's not going to be a week or a month.
Well, nothing is a simple solution. But what we can do is to start the process. And one of the ways to start that process is to have more public health centers, which really were decimated when TennCare came about. And we had public health centers that closed down. I want to bring those back online. That is a simple, decent way for people to get the care that they need at a price they can afford. And then our model, honestly, of big hospitals are changing, and we've got to look at some other models that are being used successfully around the United States. So freestanding ERs where you have a couple of beds, especially in rural areas where they can't afford a big, complex hospital system, but they could afford something that was a smaller unit where we stabilize people and then get them to a larger hospital.
Really quickly here, I want to talk about the economy. Doing great right now here in Tennessee,
Yes.
but the prospect of tariffs and a trade war is creating some uncertainty right now. Are you worried about the impact here in Tennessee?
Well, always worried about whatever will happen with our farmers and with our manufacturers, especially our car manufacturers. But I will say, President Trump is a pretty good negotiator, and I'm going to give him the reins and let him negotiate. We have seen what happens when he negotiates. We are already seeing Germany come our way. We're seeing also what he's been able to do with our security and dealing with North Korea. So let's let him do the negotiations, but I always will protect my Tennessee companies.
One last question here. TN-ready testing. It has kind of been a nightmare. No matter how you look at this, there have been so many problems over the last 3 years. How do we fix this?
Well, first of all, we don't continue to do the same old thing the same old way. It's a definition of insanity. And so the vendor is someone that has not shown that they are reliable. And so I want to look at other states. I mean, obviously, we've got 50 states in our great union. 49 of them are possibility of having another program that's working well. And I want to make sure that we can ensure our students and our teachers that when we're going to give that test is going to be given on time and given with certainty.
And parents would like to hear that. I said last question, but I kind of lied here. I've got one more.
Okay.
One last chance. What sets you apart from the other Republican candidates out there?
Well, I think I'm uniquely qualified. I've served at both the state level in the State House and State Senate. I've now served in Congress. I'm also a small business owner. I've been an educator, and I'm a nurse. And I really do have a lot of pieces that come together to make a good executive for our state.
All right, Congressman Black, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone, we're going to turn things over to the pundits next. Stay with us. You're watching Tennessee This Week on WATE 6 on your side. Welcome back, everyone, to Tennessee This Week. I'm Kristen Farley. It is time to hear from our panel of pundits today. And joining us right now, we have our healthcare analyst, Craig Griffith, WATE 6 on your side political contributor, Courtney Piper, and we have our political analyst, George Corda. Good to see all three of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's just start. We'll go right down the row here. What did you think from Congressman Black?
Well, I thought that her interview with you, I would almost say, was moderate in the sense that her television advertising is much more radical. It's, forget catch and release, no fake news and build the wall, much more oriented toward what we consider the Trump base. So I think it was a sign that she realizes now that you need to appeal to a broader group of people to be successful in the race, even though it is a primary. I did like her view on what the state should do in terms of getting health insurance for people who can't afford it, the working poor. I think that Insure Tennessee is DOA in the legislature, so we need to increase funding to our county health departments to take up that slack, and I think she realizes that, so I do agree with that point.
Courtney, how do you think she's coming across to voters, and do you think it's too late to dial it back a little bit?
Her ads are completely different from that interview that we saw with you. She seemed to tone it back a little bit. She had more of a very pleasant, casual, conversational tone. But I do think that there were some things that you all talked about where she seemed to be a little bit out of touch with what the reality is in Tennessee. I think healthcare was one, certainly healthcare was one, arming teachers was another. She seems to be still very much aligned with Trump's agenda, and we're starting to see that not play out so well in Tennessee, particularly as it relates to tariffs.
George, what do you think?
I think she hit all the buttons she needed to hit. Advertising is so much different than an interview. Advertising, you can, and I mentioned a couple of months ago on the show that business where Randy Boyd had said, I'm a moderate, was going to come out in attack ads, and now it has. Well, she's going to let the attack ads do the attacking. And she's going to talk about issues calmly and rationally and reasonably in a demeanor that she hopes will relate to people. And she punched all the buttons she needed to punch. She didn't do herself any harm, which is the first rule of those sorts of things. First, do no harm to yourself. So she did okay from the standpoint of what she's trying to accomplish.
Do you think that Congressman Black and the other candidates need to distance themselves from Trump right now?
Clearly they don't think so, because they are all talking about him and they are all invoking him. And we got at home a direct mail piece from Diane Black today with a picture of Donald Trump on it next to her. So these are sophisticated campaigns that are the beneficiaries of a lot of in-depth research. And if they didn't think it would help them, they'd stop doing it. Now, if between now and Election Day, the tariff issue creates some sort of disruption in the force, then you're going to see them in interviews take it back, and you'll also see some of those types of direct mail and TV advertising get revised.
Courtney, I see you shaking your head there.
Well, we've already seen there have been 42 farmers in the state of Tennessee that have written a letter to all the Tennessee congressional delegations saying these steel tariffs are not good for farming. It's going to cost us more to maintain and purchase new equipment. We've seen Mexico retaliate with a tariff on whiskey, and whiskey is big business in Tennessee. We've also seen folks that are the end manufacturers of aluminum and steel products say, no, these tariffs are not good for business. We're going to have to start laying people off. So as some of those realities of Trump's policies unfold, I think it would be wise for some of these candidates to take more of a measured approach to how closely they are going to be a sounding board for or repeat and parrot what President Trump is doing.
This is a primary. This is a primary. So they're going to appeal to the base as identified by the Trump base.
But
so
those people that work and are going to be affected
46
by
people
tariffs
won't affect
vote.
it. I mean, that base is staying solidly for Trump. This is a primary. The person that gets a majority of those votes probably will win the primary.
All right, we need to move on real quickly. Another big story breaking this past week. Justice Anthony Kennedy, off in the swing vote on the Supreme Court, announcing he will be stepping down. Now, President Trump gets to choose another justice. So, again, Justice Kennedy, the swing vote. Do you think that President Trump will lean towards another person similar, or do you think he's going to look for a hardline conservative? And George, let's start with you on this.
He's going to look for another Neil Gorsuch type, probably of mentality and philosophically, probably with an ethnic background of some kind that will make it harder to beat up on him, but not necessarily. And he'll look to the Republican leadership to get this through. But he's not going to make the mistake that George H.W. Bush did and nominated a David Souter who turned into an extremely liberal judge. He's not going to make that mistake because he realizes the long-term legacy impact that this choice has.
It's going to have a huge impact on policy all across our country. Courtney, is there something, when you heard the news yesterday, what was your initial concern, or where did you have any concerns?
Well, this is President Trump's opportunity to put a very hardline conservative judge in there, and particularly somebody that might support his presidency. There are a lot of legal scholars that think if anything does happen with the Mueller investigation, that the Supreme Court's going to play a very pivotal role in terms of who and what can or cannot be prosecuted or indicted. And so to the extent that if that sort of unfolds, if that story unfolds, this nominee is going to have a very pivotal role to play in really the future of our democracy and American history.
Craig, do you think that they'll get this pushed through before the midterm elections?
Well, interesting. I mean, last year, didn't we wait a year after Scalia died and we still didn't get a nominee? Will McConnell, will he wait a year till the midterms are over? I don't think so. We're going to get a rock-solid conservative judge here nominated, and it'll be passed. And if necessary, they'll use the nuclear option. And I think it puts into perspective things like Roe versus Wade and things like that down the line, not the next year or so, but when those right cases come up for adjudication before the Supreme Court, could be a different decision.
All right, time will tell. We need to take a quick break, everyone. Still to come, new leadership for the TBI, a guy that we know quite well, and his replacement as the head of KPD here in Knoxville. Stay with us. You're watching Tennessee This Week on WATE 6 on your side. All right, welcome back to Tennessee This Week, everyone. The conversation continuing now with Craig Griffith, Courtney Piper, and George Korda. And again, we all watched his profile grow. We watched him enter the running to be TBI's next director, becoming a finalist. And now David Roush is the director of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. We want to start off with, I want to get everyone's thoughts on the pick and what really Director Roush needs to do. A lot of us know him personally from his time here in Knoxville. Courtney, let's begin with you. What do you think, I keep wanting to call him Chief Roush, Director Roush needs to do, especially in these first couple months?
In the first couple of months, it's really important for him to make sure that people know who he is, both the people who are working for him, and the public at large, and general folks within government and law enforcement. We know him very well in East Tennessee because he was our police chief, but he's not so well known within other branches of government and across the state. And so one of the first things that he needs to do is sort of instill that confidence that we have in him with the folks who will be working for him, and that's number one. When he was campaigning for this job, he had mentioned that it's kind of a administration operational jobs. You got to keep information and cases moving. So to the extent that he can start executing on some of those priorities will be key for him.
What, in terms of the shakeup that happened late last week concerning the acting director there, what does he need to do to kind of make people have trust in the organization and then TBI?
Well, I think that that person was in the job for a not very long period of time. So I think that right now David has a clean slate. And those of us that work with him here in East Tennessee on various boards like I have, think that he's a tremendous person that's going to do a good job. He mentioned actually on this program a couple of months ago about, some of the things that he needed were more people, more funding, typical of an administrator for the program. But the thing about law enforcement is you don't know when you're going to be thrown into a real crisis mode. And I pray that doesn't happen here for David or for the state of Tennessee. But, sometimes you get baptism by fire in a position like this, and you have to show your true colors when you lead in a crisis mode like that. So I think if he doesn't have that, he'll spend his time going around the state. He'll also probably learn more about the legislators. And I salute Governor Haslam for picking him, and I think he'll do a good job.
George, one of the things that we've all talked about when it comes to Chief Roush, now Director Roush, was that he managed with an amount of emotion that you don't often see in leaders in positions like that as well. Do you think that will translate well for him as the director of the TBI?
Well, a slight departure from what Courtney said, I don't think he needs to be real public. When the public is not hearing bad things, the public thinks things are going pretty well. What the TBI needs to do is solve cases. If the TBI solves cases, he will get plenty of notice. His first goal is to make everybody in that organization who is saying to themselves, the Knoxville police chief is going to run the TBI, believe that he can do it, because he can. And once he establishes that level of authority and confidence with them, and they understand that what he expects is for cases to be solved, then he'll do just fine, and it's the right time for him to leave. Because frankly, there were times when he and the mayor, it wasn't public, but didn't necessarily see eye to eye on things, and it's the right time for him to be going.
We have about a minute left. Real quickly, I need to we need to talk about the mayor's replacement, KPD Chief Eve Thomas. Now, what does she need to do in these first couple of weeks? And again, we just have 1 minute, so everyone gets about 20 seconds.
Jamie Satterfield, the News Sentinel, describes her to me as a police officer's police officer. So that's good from the standpoint of police officers. It can also mean she can be overprotective of the department. So she's got to find a balance between that responsibility and dealing with the public.
Courtney, what did you think when you heard who was nominated or named?
I was in Leadership Knoxville with Eve, so I know Eve to be a tremendous leader and professional, and I think that she will certainly serve KPD and Knoxvillians well, and she just needs to do what she does best and keep doing what she's doing.
All right, Craig, you get the final word.
Former Chief Roush spoke very highly of her, so I think that she has all the tools and credentials she needs. But being, a policeman's policeman, it's different when you're having to be the boss now. We'll see how that happens, how that goes down with the troops.
All right, guys, thank you so very much. If you'd like to watch the show again, everyone, you can find it on our website, WATE.com. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back next week.
The views of guests and panelists of this program are their own and not necessarily those of WATE 6 on your side or Nexstar Broadcasting Incorporated.